Hey, Noel, Team Manning the second here, and welcome to Open Dialogue. Really happy to have you here with us today, no matter how you choose to spend time with us. If you're doing that through television, thank you, or streaming it, or if you're listening to it through our radio and podcast through WGWG, we appreciate that as well. Really extremely happy to have Checco Varese back with us today. Last time we spoke was during, I guess, toward the end of It Chapter 2 back in 2019, and a lot has happened in the world of cinema and in our lives and in our history in the past year and 4, 5, 6 months. It's pretty amazing. But Checco, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. And to your viewers and listeners, I hope everybody's safe. And I hope everybody believes that vaccines are a good thing. I just got my second one. And if you were a kid and you got the polio vaccine, you can run. And if you got the measles vaccine, you can think. And if you got the meningitis vaccine, you didn't die. And you get this one too. So that's my little contribution to the future.
Marvelous. We're glad to have you, and perfect public service announcement. Checco, your body of work is pretty extensive, and you look at the variety of the things that you've done, from music videos to working with NatGeo documentaries, being a news photographer, working on indie films, feature films, and television, episodic television, and really excited to talk today about the Amazon original anthology series, Them. And you got a chance to work on several of the episodes with another cinematographer, and so I'm really excited to hear how you are able to make that happen.
He's an old friend of mine. We've known socially each other, and I've known his body of work. He was born and raised and grew up in Mexico. I was born and raised in South America, but my film career really started in Mexico after I was a news cameraman and a documentary cameraman. So we are very close socially. And when I was invited to do Them, I met with the producers. I did a pitch. It's the usual DP thing. You go and you read the script and you put some visuals together. Sometimes the visuals are other movies. Sometimes the visuals are photographers or painters or maybe some gathering some Google search of. And when I got the job, they said, well, there is this alternating DP, which means I shoot an episode and prep the next one. While I prep, he shoots. And I thought about someone to share this process with me, and I couldn't find anybody better suited than Javier, personally, emotionally, and whose ego it's related to the quality of the work, not the politics around it. And we had a marvelous experience. We were just talking last weekend. When do we do something like this again? You know what I mean? Which is an homage to our ability to work together in our collaboration, because it's not always easy. I mean, I compare DPs to, and some of my colleagues agree and some of my colleagues don't. I compare DPs to chefs. We all go to the same supermarket, buy the same tomatoes, but you give it to one person and he'll do something, you'll give it to another person and he'll do a completely different thing. But the two chefs are trying to please the audience.
Right.
Or the client, or the restaurant, whatever it is. So Javier was fantastic, and we had a great time together.
So how did you find that collaboration to work when you handed something off and then he would hand something off maybe back to you? Talk about that way of finding visually what is consistent, but also what is yours.
It's an interesting process. I started the pilot and I shot the pilot. Usually the traditional way of doing these things is you shoot the pilot, and the pilot gets edited, and the pilot gets picked up. So the next cinematographer has a template to respect or a template to destroy. And it doesn't matter. It is a template. You have a stepping point.
Yes.
In this case, we started shooting episode 2 even before we finished shooting episode 1, because we shot episode 1 wasn't finished really, so we needed another week of shooting, but they started shooting episode 2. I prepped 3, and then we shot 1 towards the end because of logistical reasons. So it required a lot of conversations. It required a lot of visual aid. We watched dailies together, and I said,
Okay.
I think this work, but I don't think what I did really, that other stuff that I did, I don't think it really works. So you should avoid that. And he goes, oh my God, yes, you're right. But what if I do this? And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
great. That's a great idea. So it was very collaborative. So
Yeah.
Javier was the one that started doing sort of the Dodge angles, which I
Yes.
didn't,
Okay.
And I thought it was brilliant. I was the one that started using the split diopter to get 2 people in focus at the same time. And
Yes.
Javier thought that was great. So basically, you should wait for season 2. It's going to be great. We'll have it down to a science.
So are both of you planning to work on season 2 as well? Is that the plan at this moment?
You never know. You never know. But it would be lovely. It would be great. As a good freelance, I say to everyone yes, but I'll end up dancing with whoever is available at the time of the prom night. I'll say yes to all the boys, but at some point I'm gonna choose one. You know what I mean?
I love it. I love it. Well, this particular series, this anthology series, takes place in 1953, and we're going between flashbacks of North Carolina, kind of, I guess, a mountainous rural area in North Carolina, and then coastal California, and looking at those two different locations and the things happening within those locations, there's definitely different looks. And you mentioned Dutch angle was interesting because I'd made several notes. The Dutch angles I really was drawn to, especially because it brought you into this kind of off-kilter world of what's happening. And we're not going to give a whole lot away, but is it actually happening, or is it happening in someone's mind? Those are some interesting things that it plays along with. Low angles I really loved as well. There were some extreme close-ups that I thought helped tell the story. And then you're talking about that the dual storytelling aspects with split screens, which I know the editors were involved in, but I'm sure that you had something to do with that as well. And then you look at that deep focus at times where there's things happening behind the subjects that if you're not paying attention, you may miss something. And I love that. And I think back to when we talked in 2019, and you mentioned that cinematographers are keepers of history, keepers of memory. And this particular series truly is a story that looks at history, a very tragic time in history. And it does it through the unique aspect of suspense, little sci-fi elements, and other things as well. So I appreciate your visual storytelling and how that continues to help us to see, experience, think, and ask questions, because I think all of those things are needed in the world of cinema, whether it's cinema on television or streaming or on the big screen.
Yeah, to segue a little bit on the earlier part of your question, one of the things that drew my attention to them was, one has to be careful as a cinematographer. It's like you do one successful horror, and then all of a sudden 10 years later, you keep doing horror. You do one successful comedy, and then you cannot get away from people throwing lemon pie at their faces. I remember when I used to do commercials, not because I don't do them anymore, but because they barely exist unless you're doing some kind of whatever, Xanax at night, and people running in Central Park. And then there is a subtitle that says, please take Xanax so you can sleep. Unless you do that, there is very little left. But I remember one time when I was doing commercials, the agency called my agent and said, is he good with shooting kids? And I answered to my agent, yes, I have a very low dolly. so I can put the camera low. That's a director question. You don't ask me if I'm good with shooting kids. Who cares? It's just, yeah, kids, dogs, sometimes seagulls are more complicated, but other than that, so so one has to be careful. And I was offered a couple of other horror movies whose sort of subtext was just the genre per se.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't interested in that. Not because I don't respect the genre, but just because personally I wasn't. It's not a story I need to tell. There are
Right.
people that tells it. Another Chainsaw Massacre. I'm happy not to watch and
Yes.
not to see
Yeah.
and not to participate. And I'm sure there are people that want to watch it, and that's completely respectable. I don't want to be part of it. But when I read the script, it had the subtext of a very, very complex situation of racial
Mm-hmm.
injustice or racial tension or
Right.
racial, however you want to phrase it. In the word of politeness, racism, it's always varnished with a lot of excuses and the founding fathers and the this and the that and the other. Racism is racism. The Romans were racist. The Greeks were racist. The French were racist. My ancestors, the Italians, are and were racist. So this is nothing to do. It's something we need to explore and we need to tell our kids so it doesn't happen. And it will happen. Hopefully, it'll happen less. One of the things that was very interesting to me is the mixing between, I don't know if horror is the word, but thriller, horror, the occult, and racism,
Mm-hmm.
because it explored the hiding fears everybody has. You turn off the lights at night and you hear a noise and you turn, and that is not because necessarily of all the horror movies we'd watch. It's because 200 generations ago, our ancestor turned, there was a wolf or a bear or whatever it is, like a mammoth eating them. So it is embedded into our DNA, the fear. So work racism through fear is the fear of the unknown or the fear
Mm-hmm.
of the other or the fear of
Right.
the different color or the different eyes shape lately, unfortunately. To me, it was fascinating.
Right. The fear
And
of
that,
them, and that's
ex-
the them,
exactly,
whatever that them is, you name it.
is the other people,
Right.
those, yeah. So anyway, I read the script and I was very drawn into that. And to go back to your actual question, there there there's several time frames in the movie. One time frame happens in later in the series, and I'm not gonna. It's already streaming, so whoever watches it will know. But there is one episode that happens in the 1800s, which is the genesis of the entity that haunts this family. And that happens towards the end of the series, is episode 8. And that was a real flashback. It wasn't a
Right.
flashback, it was a real prequel to,
Yes.
to the process. But then you start watching the series and you realize that these people came from North
Yep.
Carolina,
North
South
Carolina.
Carolina,
North Carolina. Yeah.
North Carolina, which obviously I wish we could have shot in North Carolina. We ended up shooting in Northern California, in Southern California. So then Northern Carolina is by definition green and lush, and it's almost the Amazon jungle minus, the python and the tigers, but, or at least that's my memories of it. So
Yes.
so we waited towards the rain season, January. Well, rain season in California, it's a joke, unfortunately, but we waited for a couple of weeks of rain, and it was green and it was lush. And with the help of backlighting, most of the trying to shoot everything where the sun was low, so the shadows were dark, so the green in the shadows was deeper and the yellow in the shadows was not front lit.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
there were some cinematography tricks, and we sold it pretty good. There was a house that they built a set that looks like a rural North Carolina, and something horrible happened there in episode 5. um, and we use a chocolate filter, chocolate Tiffin, number one, which is
Okay.
if you don't color correct it, it becomes almost sepia, and it's
Right.
also very old. But that wasn't the intention. The chocolate has an ability to reach into blues and greens very deep because it has a layer of yellow. So if you were to take the layer of yellow out, you basically push the green and the blue back. Very technical, but it's like the painters, you paint a canvas yellow and then you add blue on
Yes.
top of it, and the blue it's way more saturated because
Right.
of the yellow. So,
Right. Right.
so if you have a daughter in kindergarten, go steal the acrylics and you try it, and that's exactly what I do. Nothing more complicated than that. Or son in kindergarten. So we did that for the Carolinas, for the East Coast version,
Right.
and then they go into the Promised Land. The Promised Land is California. The Great Migration. It's abandoning the Jim Crow laws or the Jim
Hmm.
Crow, yeah, the Jim
Right.
Crow
Right.
world.
Right.
Abandoning a past of fear because something horrible happened to this specific family.
Right.
So they arrived into the Promised Land. And the Promised Land, it's not what it's supposed to
Right.
be.
Yeah.
There is a very interesting subtext also, that is the developers of the real estates in Compton did exactly the same. I don't know if it's in Compton per se, but it was in like Boyle Heights. So did the same with the Jewish community. The Jewish community that escaped Nazi Germany or escaped the pogroms in Russia arrived, and they gave them houses. The developers, they sold them houses for a extravagant interest rate, but they didn't know how to read. They didn't know how to write. The Promised Land again.
Right.
So 8 years later, all these people couldn't pay the house, so the banks recover the houses, however you say it in English.
Repossess
They
them. Yeah. Yeah.
repossess them,
Right.
and right away sold them to the Hispanic community that's coming to work in the fields
Mhm.
for an exorbitant amount
Right.
of money, because there were no rules. So by the 50s, they ran out of Jewish people, they ran out of Hispanic people. So now who do we do that to? The African American community. And that's historically correct. And it's fascinating. So
Mhm.
all these people bought houses that then couldn't possess anymore, and then they did the same.
Right.
So the Emery family buys a house, he has a job,
A
and
good job. A very good job.
very good job. He's
Yeah.
an engineer. It's probably, I don't remember if that's the case, but probably the GI Bill. So because he was in the war, so he came back from the war. So he's probably a GI Bill. He's an engineer. He has a very good job designing airplanes, I believe.
Hmm.
Um, the wife used to be a teacher. He cannot teach here. They have two little girls, and they find the most horrible situation that apparently it was watered down by the writer because it was much worse than that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In
Wow.
Compton, in the 50s, apparently it was much worse than that. They were literally closing inside the house and burning it,
Wow.
as opposed to just,
Yeah.
burning the garden, which is what
Right.
we did.
Yeah.
Well, if they
Yeah.
would have closed inside the house and burned the house, then there's no more serious, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But
It's you talk about the family running from something and searching for paradise or the promised land, and they find out that is not the paradise they were hoping for. Oppression is there. It's still there. It doesn't matter where you pick up and move. Oppression, racism, fear, uh, anger, resentment, all of those things can manifest. And it does, I think, boil down to fear of the other, fear of
them.
them. Yeah, exactly. I grew up watching reruns of a TV series called The Twilight Zone, Rod Serling's
Yes, of course.
Twilight Zone. Very much loved how that series was able to touch on social commentary and do it in ways that really did honestly make you think. And this series does that same thing. It makes you ask questions. It makes you look at yourself and ask questions about yourself. the evils and horrors of racism, no matter what the form, and there are many forms. It's difficult to watch, but it is something we need to watch, because the inhumanity of how we can treat others is almost unbelievable. But yet it's there. But also the hope that we can provide to others if we choose that path, I think is incredible. And that's when we can start asking ourselves the questions: what can we do differently? And how can we reach out? And how would we react if we were in this situation?
And also, I think the writer, showrunner, producer, Little Marvin, which it's fascinating story, because this is his first job in the film business. I mean, I'm not saying it's his first job. He was a very successful fashion designer. He was a very successful advertising. He was a very successful in the music business, and he decided to write this. He's brilliant, this is his first job. This is like how do you call it, opera prima. He's like, okay, he's coming out of film school. This is the Sundance little short film that it's fascinating. He is brilliant. But I think the other brilliant thing that he did is he made our family flawed.
Yes.
They bring their own demons. They have their own fears. And instead of making them the perfect family that faces social injustice or racial injustice, he made it the imperfect family that faces social injustice, and which makes it even more lovable.
Yes.
And even more relatable, because I'm not perfect. You are not perfect. Right. Our listeners are not perfect. And if you see the perfect family, then all of a sudden you don't believe it. And once you lose the audience, that's it.
I think anytime you can have characters who are flawed and you're still drawn into them, then there's something there. And the best characters in the world, whether it's literature, whether it's on film, whether it's episodic television or streaming, or even in song that has stories, the flawed characters are the ones that are believable. And you absolutely hit on this. The series is... Go ahead.
Ulysses abandoned his wife for 30 years, and she was still waiting there 30 years later, and he's a flawed character.
Right.
But it's been 3,000 years. We've read it, all of us, 100 times, what I mean? And it's for 3,000 years, and he's a flawed character. He abandoned the wife, he abandoned the family, he abandoned the kids, he abandoned everyone to follow his dream. And he comes back, and he's a lonely old man.
Yeah.
Very sad, And that's 3,000 years old. So we haven't invented anything.
That's right. We're just finding different ways of telling those stories.
The same story.
Or we're finding different ways of living the stories, because some of those stories are us. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. As you looked at some of the more horror aspects of them, and some of the creepier aspects, because there are some creepy aspects.
Oh my God!
That really got me. And then there's also some very, just as I mentioned earlier, very painful. And you mentioned episode 5. That one it tore me apart. And finding ways to create those. Were there things that you borrowed from what you gained on It Chapter 2? That you said, I think this will work in this instance? Or what are some things that you did that maybe that built upon?
I don't know. In particular, Chapter 2 was, we all are who we are because of the body of work we have. My daughter is 14, almost 14. And I was trying to explain to her that one is born with 150,000 mistakes to make. I already make 132,000. So I only have, 12,000 mistakes left. You know what I mean? Experience is about making mistakes, you know, and you want to get older, and the more mistakes you've done, those mistakes are not going to happen. I still have a bunch in front of me, but those are not going to happen.
At least you hope they don't happen again.
Exactly. One of the things that I think, in my particular case, and I don't speak for Javier, but in my case, I'm not a horror movie fan. I haven't watched. I mean, of course, okay. Yes, I watched Rosemary's Baby. I watched The Exorcist. I watched Carrie, and maybe you can stop counting right there. You know, you know.
In chapter 2
If
probably was the
chapter two,
last one.
yeah, it was the last one exactly. So I'm not a genre geek.
Right.
Therefore, I look at horror through the eyes of an audience, not of what the tricks of the trade are.
Okay.
When in episode 5 there is a scene that is horrendous, and I'm not gonna give it away, but
Right.
there is a pillowcase involved and there is a baby involved with that. So I went to the producer and I said, "Have you ever watched 1900, 1900 from Bertolucci?" And he goes, "No." And I said, "Let me get you a scene from 1900 where Donald Sutherland grabs the the legs of a, and this is a drama about the historical drama about the Italy and etc. And it's exactly the same thing with a 12-year-old kid that tragically ends up in the same way. They swing
Right.
him around until there is a column involved, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave it at that.
Right.
And he goes, "Oh my God, I've never seen this movie." I said, "This is not horror. This is reality. This is what happened." I used to be a news cameraman. Many of the things you see in horror movies, unfortunately, happen in reality. So, in terms of story, I think is my own background that it's not related to that world that I bring. In terms of technique and etc., I think you watch it's in your instinct, it's in your heart. You know, I'm talking to you, and then all of a sudden I look that way, and I look at something and I squint my eyes because I don't see it's dark in the frame. So my instinct is to get the camera on the other side and push very slowly so the audience can sense that I'm thinking.
Right.
You know, how do you think? I mean, obviously, the actors do their part, and Robert De Niro looks like he's thinking because he's Robert De Niro, or Deborah Ayorinde, or Ashley, you know. But I need to enhance that. And how do you enhance that? Maybe sometimes you do a little push, sometimes you do a little pull. It's all in the grammar. The camera, it's the accents and the dots and the commas of the storytelling. You know, the cinematography, it's the decision whether it's prose, poem, or whatever the other genres are. But the camera is the commas and the accents and the little
Yeah.
dots and
Yeah.
the spaces. That is what the camera does, and the lenses. So
Yeah.
once you have that dialogue and once you understand the dialogue with that, and then you need to have a brilliant operator that we had, Joseph Arena, which he was the glue between Javier and I.
Okay.
He would tell Javier, Joseph will tell, "Oh, Checco, this is very cool thing." And so Javier will text me and we'll have a group chat. And, yeah, I don't think it worked out. And Javier said, "Oh my God, I was a day, let's see work out." So the operator was the glue in between
Right.
us.
Right. Wow. Wow. Well, any other thoughts you want to make sure you share about the series Them that is currently on streaming on Amazon?
I think one of the other thing is that if you look at the first episode, or any of the episodes, but in this particular case, the first episode, I think you can see as an audience the multi disciplinary wedding marriage we had. The production design is beautiful. The
Yes.
wardrobe is beautiful. The makeup and the hair are beautiful. The cinematography, it's
Yes.
okay and it's beautiful. The camera work. So it's really a there is nothing that stands out as something I personally don't like. I mean, it's a matter of taste. Some people
Right.
won't like it, you know, but if you like that, you'll see that there is a glue, and the glue it's the story, and the glue is the professionalism, and the
Right.
glue is it's the ability to deliver on a sense. And I thought that was very well portrayed in the episodes. I honestly haven't watched them all because I watch my episodes because I color correct them. But that's a different. You don't watch a movie. When I did it, chapter 2,
Yes.
I worked in the post production of it probably for a month. I
Wow.
mean, I shot for whatever
Yes.
9 months and etc. Then I worked for it on and off for a month, and then I went to the premiere and I sat down and I watched. And I sat between the director and the producer, or between one of the producer and another producer, and they elbowed me and said, "Stop getting scared. You've seen this movie." I said, "No, it's the first time I see it. It's the first time I see it as an audience." And
Yes.
yesterday night, I streamed episode 1
Yeah.
because I had the opportunity. And oh my God, I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, that's great. Did I shot
Yes.
that? Because it's the first time you see it as an
Yes.
audience. And that
Yes.
experience is completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about the collaborative part, and you've mentioned that throughout this interview. And as I was making my notes, getting through the first 5, 6, 7 episodes, because I'm still not finished. So I'm still getting there. So
When
you
you watch eight, send me a text and let me know
okay.
what you think.
I will. I will. But it is one of those shows that is very cinematic.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing the lines blur between what we see on the silver screen in a theater and what we're able to see at home, just from the quality standpoint. And I think that I'm just continue to be amazed at what we're able to enjoy. Of course, the bigger the screen, the better. I'm all for that. But to be able to experience that same type of quality at home in your
Yeah.
comfort zone, wherever that is, it's amazing. And this series, the soundtrack, the score
Oh, the score
was
is fascinating,
fantastic.
isn't it? Yeah.
The sound design, you mentioned production design. I thought that it clicked on every level, and that's a challenge to do well and to do right. And this one really did hit every single mark. And I think next year, when we get into awards season and we start talking about some of those shows that will stick with us, and for different reasons, this is going to be one of those shows. We're now at the end of an award season, and but things here, this series is definitely something that we are going to be talking about, and if we're not, we should be. We should
From
be.
your lips to the Academy.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
fascinating. And the one thing I'm in an apartment in a house, in a rental house in Richmond, because I'm doing another project, but I was watching it in the television, and not because I'm a cinematographer, but every TV nowadays has a movie mode, you know?
Right.
And I highly, I mean, there are obviously whoever is more proficient will change it to their, but at least when you finish watching CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, whatever you watch, just make sure you change it to movie mode before you stream anything, because I started streaming it. I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And I went and put it in movie mode, and it looked, I mean, yes, in my house, my TV, I'm a cinematographer. That's what I do for a living. My TV
Right.
is better, but it was still fascinating.
Yeah.
So, our listeners and viewers, make sure you put it in movie mode, please, not
Absolutely.
game mode.
That's
Yeah,
right. Well, but before we leave, I do want you
yeah.
to talk about your new series you're working on. It's a Hulu series, and you were telling me before we went on the air that you're having the pleasure of doing all 8 episodes. So let's talk a little bit about this series. Dope Sick, I think, is the name of it.
Yes,
Correct?
yes. It's a fascinating series written by Danny Strong. He's a prolific writer and producer and director and actor. Um, he wrote a series about the opioid epidemic. Um, and it's tragic and it's a horror in itself. You know, it it's fascinating. We're in Richmond. We have crew from all over the East Coast, and some of us are from the West Coast. And it's fascinating how you talk about it on set.
Mm.
Everybody has a brother, a sister, a cousin, a friend, a
Wow.
uncle, a mother that it's either struggling with opioid addiction, or died of it, or in jail of it.
Wow.
Everyone.
Yeah.
And the tragedy of this is that is who is the person you trust most? You trust most your family, and then the second person you trust most is your doctor.
Mhm. Mm.
No, and your
Yeah.
doctor gave it to you.
Wow.
He gave it to you. Unwilling. I'm not saying he did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Unwillingly, he gave it to you. So that is, and nothing. It's a series that shoots here in Richmond and a little bit in the surroundings. We went to a beautiful, beautiful town called Clifton Forge, 2 hours
Mhm.
from here. And it's the story of these two local prosecutors that developed this for 10 years, and they finally get to the big pharma. And so it's first, the director was Barry Levinson. He directed 2 episodes. Then the second director, 2 episodes, Michael Cuesta. The third director, Patricia Riggin, which I have the pleasure of having worked many times with her. And the third director is Danny Strong, 2 episodes. So it's an 8 episode series. I'm fascinated by the fact that I'm the DP on all of them.
Mhm.
I'm exhausted. You shoot 12 hours a day and you scout on Saturdays,
Yeah,
6 day weeks. It's exhausting, but it's very rewarding.
yeah.
Not If I were to do it again, I wouldn't mind doing it with Javier, alternating, or the cinematographers, obviously. But there is something interesting about being the glue on the whole project, and I
Yes.
think it's doable in a different way, maybe with a break in between, or maybe
Yeah.
I don't know. But
Yeah.
I need to find a way to do it again without having to get B12 shots 3 times a week so I don't fall asleep on set.
Yeah, that's not a good thing when the cinematographer falls asleep on the set.
No, it's not, or starts sneezing, and
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
snoring. Sorry, starts snoring on set.
well,
Who's snoring? Sorry.
that's okay. You can sneeze too if you want to. Just make sure the sound is not rolling at that time, and make sure you have your mask on. So that's the key
And the
right there.
shield, and the
Yes,
shield, and the
yes.
mask. Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of a final question is the shooting that you've been doing during the pandemic. How different and difficult did that make it for you to shoot compared to the pre-pandemic world?
There are many disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is we're forced to use a shield and the mask. So communicating with the shield and the mask, it's been extraordinarily challenging.
Right.
At the same time, it kept us all working and
Right.
semi-healthy, all of us. So I'm not criticizing. I'm just stating the
Right.
obvious.
Right.
There is one interesting point about this whole thing is that we maximize the communication time and the clarity of communication
Wow.
to reduce the amount of words and reduce the amount of information you give. It's not being fun,
Yeah.
but it's very efficient.
Yes. Yes.
So I think if I were to move forward and inherit what the knowledge of the pandemic has been,
Right.
I don't think I mind the masks,
Yeah.
because as said, it's 120 people in a closed environment. If somebody gets the flu, everybody gets the flu. So
Right.
knock on wood, nobody got COVID, but nobody got the flu either,
Right. Right. Yeah.
So I would probably keep the mask of some sort of social distancing mask. I would
Mhm.
love to hug my friends. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would love to eliminate the shields.
Mhm.
But the one thing I would keep is, so we do rehearsals, everybody comes in, and then everybody has to leave the stage, not only the set, the area. So the level of concentration in those 10 minutes somebody gives you to be there, it's very, very high.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we regain a level of efficiency that used to be during the film times when we had celluloid, because the celluloid was very expensive.
Right. Right.
So everybody was very concentrated, because when you roll camera, you're rolling $1,000 a minute or whatever, 10,000
Right.
or whatever it is, the number. When we got into digital cinema, it's fine, we can do it again. It's all zeros and ones. And it got a little too laissez-faire.
Right.
I think this brought us back to that original discipline of, it's very expensive, it's very precious, we're here to do this, and we'll push forward in the most efficient way we can.
Yeah.
So I think that it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm right there with you from the efficiency standpoint, as it relates to meetings that I have on a regular basis. I've actually come to enjoy and appreciate Zoom for certain meetings because I'm not having to spend the time going somewhere to a meeting and didn't have to take that time to come back to the office. I can just do it wherever I am, or if I'm in my car, I can do a meeting on my phone and zoom in. And I've really and I have been able to be more efficient at other things because of that time that I'm able to save. And there's actually times that I'm sitting here in a meeting and somebody asks a question about a certain project, and while they're talking, I can pull the project up on another monitor to my left, and boom, I've got all the details and I can share it on the screen. So it's definitely made the workflow different and made me rethink what efficiency is. So I'm right there with you on that. Checco Varese, our guest right here on Open Dialogue. So much appreciate your time. This has been marvelous to reconnect with you, and I look forward to talking to you once the next series comes out and talk about your work on that as you had a chance to screen it.
Exactly.
And it is called Dope Sick, and that'll be on Hulu sometime in the future. And if you want to check out Checco's work right now, you can do it numerous ways, but the newest is checking out Them Covenant. It's an Amazon original series, and it's an anthology series. And really, thank you so much for taking the time today. Any final thoughts, final comments you want to share with our audience?
No, I always appreciate your knowledge and your good questions, and the fascinating part to be on this side of being a journalist as opposed to on that side that I used to be, is that with people like you in particular and other colleagues of you, it's a pleasure because the answers are only as good as the questions are. So when you ask me a question, I'm like, oh my God, really? Did you do that to me right now? I need to think. But that's the pleasure of it. And I'm having a thrill and I'm having fun, and I really appreciate it. I hope your audience does too.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I will definitely reach out to you when
Anytime.
I sure will. And for our audience, thank you for spending time with us. We always appreciate it. We know you have things that you can be doing with your time other than this, maybe Zoom calls or walking across the world. But thanks for taking the time with us, whether that's through radio, through our podcast, or through TV and streaming. Thank you so much. I'm Noel Manning for Checco Varese for Open Dialogue. Until next time, that's a wrap.